more than likely you've already heard of Netflix's Adolescence. And if you haven't, then I highly encourage you to check it out. It is quite the TV series on every level imaginable. Now, at its core, what it's about is that there's this teenage boy who is accused of quite a heinous crime. And, he gets taken into custody, and the show explores, did he do it? What's the fallout of that? And things of that nature. And that's what the show's about. It's only 4 episodes. It's a limited series, but each episode is roughly an hour, and each episode is shot in one single take. And the artistry of that is just immense. Many people have talked about that. But one of the byproducts of that, given the heavy subject matter, it only ramps it up because, anytime you have a cut within a TV show or movie, it releases some tension, right? It truly does. And here, you're stuck in real time with each of these characters processing whatever they might be processing. Perhaps it's an emotion, perhaps it's information, and what to do with that information. And many times it's a combination of those, right? And it truly goes into territory that I didn't expect. I think a lot of people, seeing their reviews and their reactions, they're kind of surprised at the direction it took in a good way, right? It is unrelenting in that, and it gives you a lot to think about. And for those reasons, I wanted to recommend it. Now, based on what I talked about as far as the subject matter, it is a heavy show, right? So, I'm not necessarily one for spoilers, and don't read the spoilers, but do some homework as far as like if this might be triggering for you, especially if you have teenagers, whether boys or girls. It can be quite upsetting, and you can certainly kind of get the themes and the discussions of the show without having to subject yourself, not necessarily to that torture. Like, I think art that has this heaviness to it has a very specific purpose, and it is worth going on that journey. But at the same time, I also understand when people opt out of that experience. So that's kind of my overall review of it, but I did also want to get into some of the spoilers. So if you've seen the show, I want to dive just a little bit briefly into the themes. This isn't going to be a full spoiler talk, but just the general stuff, right? And, as far as me, it's interesting because I look at my adolescence, right, and try to compare it to what it is today. Now, I was at the onset of when social media was becoming a thing. We had things like MySpace. Facebook didn't come until I was already in college, and things of that nature, right? So we were really allowed to just be kids, and, we messed around and did stupid stuff, but we weren't as punished for it, right? Now, that's not to say that, a crime of this nature shouldn't be punished, but I think the exploration is the chicken and the egg syndrome, right? Like, what caused the boy to do what he did, right? Why did he take the actions that he took? And is it a byproduct of the environment? Was it always with him? Things like that, right? And specifically the incel culture, right? And for me, it's one of those things that when you look at it, I feel empathy for so-called incels, right? It's this idea that you have trouble dating, and you feel lonely, and whatnot. And I think those, in many ways, actually can be very far-reaching and universal themes and emotions, right? Like, I think we all go through a sense of loneliness, especially in the day and age that we live in, especially with COVID and things like that. So I think the distinction, though, becomes when you don't feel it for others, right? And you're not identifying yourself in somebody else. And I think that's obviously a major problem in that way, where you think like that A, you're a victim, B, that things should just be handed to you. And listen, we're all deserving of love, we're all deserving of compassion and things like that. But guess what? The idea of that is that it's a two-way street. And, how we solve for that certainly is a difficult matter. That's why, like, modern parenting does scare the shit out of me, admittedly. But one of the solutions that I've heard that resonates with me, I'm not saying it's the end all be all, is this notion, and I've heard this from Will Arnett, and maybe he got it from somebody else, I don't know, but I heard it on the Smart List podcast from Will Arnett when he talks about his kids, is that he gives them greater allowance in the real world to mess up, right? So, whatever it might be, they're going to receive less punishment in exchange for less screen time, right? And I think that's the danger of this. And, there's a show that I've worked on called When Millennials Become Moms. And, the kind of paradoxical thing is parents nowadays really scrutinize and worry about their kids in the real world. Are they going to be, abducted and things of that nature? But we ironically give way too much leeway with the digital side, which, as this show proves, or at least makes the attempt to, argue in terms of our real world, that the digital side can actually be more deleterious than the real world for these kids, and how impressionable they may be. And quite literally, teenagers, like, their brains are still developing. They're still figuring out critical thinking and things of that nature. And they're literally going through changes. That's what adolescence is, They're going from, children to becoming adults, right? Like, that's the transition of adolescence. And so there's a lot to contend with. And in many ways, while there's all this information out there online, we're like drowning in this knowledge, but don't have enough wisdom. I don't think that's the exact adage, but something along those lines. Like, there's just a sea of knowledge, but not enough actual true wisdom. And so, in that sense, it's interesting to me, and I think a greater aspect of it too is that even beyond adolescence, but just human beings more so now than ever, we start to identify with a certain term, ideology, whatever it may be, and everything is seen through only that lens. Like, a simple version of this is only Democrats or Republicans. And when you already put yourself in a certain framework and start to identify as like that, then I don't think you see the world truly as it is, right? And I don't think you can take the best action for what it is. I think part of it is we have to almost like strip down these terms that we associate with us, and like, regardless of what you name a chair is still a chair, right? It's going to exist one way or the other, regardless of what you call it. So I think it's that aspect that we have to like just have an openness to be able to just approach some of this stuff with just kindness and compassion. And I say that because I'm obviously an adult. I don't know your age and things like that, but much to like the Gandhi quote, we have to be the change that we wish to see. And part of the aspect that this show asks is who's at fault, right? And certainly the dad in this TV show, or limited series rather, put a lot of blame on him. Now, whether that's justified or not, I don't know. But we can have that influence, and we can start to do the best that we can, and I'm not saying he didn't or wasn't, but by having this information and keeping this a little bit top of mind, we can be better role models for kids and things like that, right? So just something to think about. But I also know that it's going to be even more difficult as we get into an age of AI, where how do you deduce what's real and what's not? And especially when we look at pornography or just online dating and things like that, the fact that people already have AI companions is wild, right? To think about. And how do you combat that? Because then, in theory, whether it's a friend or like the seemingly romantic relationship, an AI is an AI, and it's not going to necessarily give you pushback if you don't want it to, right? In fact, there's a wonderful movie called Companion that sort of explores this theory of just having an AI robot, to your heart's content, right? And unfortunately, something like that, I think, in the end, makes us more lonely and more disconnected, and I don't think that's a good thing. So, yeah, there's a lot to think about with adolescence, and I just wanted to touch upon a few of the things that I've been thinking about, certainly. So, but there's any number of areas to go into. I would love to explore some of those. So comment down below. Just to note a spoiler if you want to get truly into spoilers, and we can have that discussion. I would love to. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in. I truly do appreciate you. I'll see you next time.